Hi there, this is Jeff Sklar, and I'm pleased to welcome you to my podcast, The Practice of You. I'm a lawyer in Los Angeles, and I'm fascinated by lawyers who have brought joy and balance to their lives in a career that doesn't always make that easy. In each episode, I'll have a one-on-one conversation with a lawyer who excels professionally, but more importantly is committed to promoting their well-being. Whether athletic, creative, or mindful, there are dozens of ways that lawyers have achieved balance, and we're going to explore that together. You can find this show on all of our major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, sklarkirsh.com. And with that, let's start practicing. Hey there, it's Jeff Sklar, and I'm here with my dear friend Justin Bowen. Justin, welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to be here.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
Justin and I go way back, with 14 years, 12 years, something like that.
Yeah,
I stopped counting after like 7.
Yeah. We were both sort of starting our firms. So it was an interesting time to meet.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, I'm an M&A corporate lawyer, and Justin will tell you about what he does as a tax lawyer, but obviously we've spent a lot of time in the trenches together, dealing with easy and not stressful situations.
Mostly, yep.
Yeah.
That's our business.
Exactly. And you're actually very good at making the stressful situations less stressful.
For everyone else, maybe.
Right. So Justin's here today to talk with me about surfing, which is near and dear to his heart, and part of his life I really have not gotten to see over the last 12 years, seeing as how Palos Verdes is in California miles, like 8,000 miles away.
Yeah, other side of the world.
Right.
That's why I live there.
Right, exactly. So maybe we could start by you telling us a little bit about your practice, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I guess I would refer to myself as an M&A tax lawyer. Bowen Tax Law is a boutique tax and exec comp and benefits practice. All of us are sort of former big law tax lawyers. We're kind of like a big law firm tax department that's out in its own firm. We do business deals like you. We just happen to specialize in the tax aspects of those. So we do planning for strategic business transactions, as you know, and then work really closely with guys like you, getting deals done.
Yeah. And you founded the firm?
2011. I started the firm in 2011 after I left my prior law firm. Yeah. So we're just kind of coming out of the Great Recession at that time.
Yeah.
And no idea whether it was a good idea or whether it was good timing, but decided to do it.
I think you caught a wave.
As you know.
Right.
I think you were a couple of years before me. So.
Just one, 2010. Okay. Yeah. In your spare time, right, if you got your family, you're down in PV, and surfing, I know from our talks, is a very important part of your life and something that you keep very separate from the business world of your life. And maybe you can start by giving some background on how you first came to surfing and what it's meant to your development.
Yeah, sure. So how I first came to surfing, I mean, it feels like it's always been a part of my life, but I guess in reality, I was 11 when I started surfing. I live where I grew up, and where I grew up, there's, it's a beach-related, it's an ocean-related environment. And when I was a kid, I grew up in a single mom household, and my mom had to work full-time, and the beach was kind of my babysitter for a lot of the summer when school was out. So, yeah, when I was 11, I was at the beach and with a bunch of friends, same age, and one of them, gave me a surfboard to try, and I tried it, and I think I bought it from his cousin for $50. And
a good investment.
Yeah, I still have that board.
Do you really?
I do, yeah. So yeah, that's where it started, and I'd say it pretty quickly became a really important part of my life. When you're that young. And surfing mainly in the summer at the beach, it's more of a recreation thing and hanging out with friends.
Yeah.
And then I think I really, really caught the bug, a couple of years after that. I sort of stuck with it. And I actually remember the moment when it really hit me, like what it was and what it could be for me. And I was at a surf camp run by the LA County lifeguards at that time that my mom put me in because I was always having to stay busy during the summer.
Yeah.
And they took us to Leo Carrillo, I think. And it was the first time I really rode a wave sort of along the face rather than just like crashing towards the shore.
Right.
And I remember getting back in the van, and just being like, just feeling totally different.
How did you feel different? What was that?
Well, it's difficult to describe that feeling because I think that's like at the heart of all this probably that we're going to talk about. But there's it's like a world opened up of this adventure, this experience, this sort of mode that I could put myself in by doing this thing.
Yeah.
That was just different than anything I had ever experienced. It was sort of a mixture, I guess, of enjoyment and peace, even at that young of an age, and connection to something maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so have you kept with surfing? You're 11, you start, you're a teenager, you then really connect with it. Have you maintained it consistently right up to this point, or did you ever put it down and come back to it?
Yeah, I never put it down. I would say there were ebbs and flows, particularly when I was sort of getting my formal education. So when I was in undergrad, that was probably the least I surfed.
Yeah.
Just living away from the shore, and then being busy with school and social things, and I probably surfed the least then. But
Where'd
still,
you go to undergrad?
I went to I started at Berkeley, and that to me, the trek to Ocean Beach in San Francisco, which is what I was doing, was really kind of far and arduous. And that's if anyone who's surfed there, that's a very difficult place if you're not spending all your time there. The paddling.
That's what I was sort
really
of curious,
intense.
is if you had a beach near where you were in school.
Yeah, there I did. It wasn't really near. I mean, we were going there, and to Santa Cruz, which was pretty good haul.
Yeah.
So that was really hard, and that's actually one of the reasons why I actually transferred to USC here back in LA. It was just too difficult to surf. That was part of the problem for me. So I transferred to be closer, but I ended up being like so much more social at SC than I was up at Berkeley that sort of like took a lot of the time and energy that I would have spent surfing away. So that was probably the least.
When your social life and your surfing, those have to be prioritized above school. Like that makes perfect sense.
That I never questioned.
It's only a question whether surfing or social life should be the top priority.
Yeah, school never took much of a priority for me until law school, so that wasn't too much of a problem.
That's the same for me. And so today, are you surfing once a week? Or are you surfing? What's your surfing life in terms of the logistics look like these days?
It's really seasonal. And that's more just a function of where we are geographically than anything else. So during the winter months, I might surf every day, 5 days a week. It just depends. There's stretches where I'll surf every day.
Like what time of day?
It just depends. We'll probably get into it more, but but the surfing dictates the schedule more than I dictate when I surf. So, but I'll try to go in the morning. If I can before I work, especially if I'm busy at work. But then there are times of the year like summer, we're not there yet, but when we get into like the deep part of summer, July, August, the waves just aren't good. And it's easier for me to like focus on getting other things done. And I might surf once every 2 weeks.
So that's so counterintuitive. You'd think like summertime.
Yeah.
Obviously not a surfer, right? So I come to this as totally naive and borderline ignorant, but I think it's super cool. And so I sort of wish I could do it. And I have these notions in my head of, number one, that it's best to surf in the morning when it's dark and cold, like Point Break, for anybody old enough to remember that movie.
Classic.
Yeah. And so it sounds like that's a faulty notion. And the other notion that surfing is really good in the summertime sounds like doesn't bear out.
Just depends where you are. Our swells here the ones we want are from the northwest. So these are storms off of up by Alaska.
Yeah.
They get into our swell windows. So those are the best waves where we are. But, it can totally vary. I mean, there are even places in Southern California that are really good during the summer, like Malibu can get really good on south swells, so as the seasons change, right, the storms move around the globe and they start happening more off of Mexico and even further south. And these, those swells come up from the south, and if you're living in a place where they get good exposure to the south swells, then summer's great. But for us, it's not. So sometimes I travel to surf in the summer, but usually I just surf less. And, that's, as I've gotten older, that's more and more okay with me.
Yeah.
For it to be more seasonal.
Yeah. And that's actually how the only conversations you and I have really had about surfing have related to when I know you're going on a surf trip.
Right.
To some exotic locale.
Yeah. For some reason, it feels more acceptable to talk about that in a work setting than it does just your daily sort of like I'm leaving the office at 10 to go surf for 2 hours.
Right.
I'm not booking any calls during that time. That doesn't feel as appropriate.
You don't put surfing into the Outlook calendar.
Yeah.
No phone available.
Pretty much, but no. But you're not wrong. It's just that it's like morning oftentimes is, but it's really, I think, and this is sort of part of the issue with surfing in a way and being a professional is it's very fickle, and the conditions can be very fickle, and everything depends on the tide and the wind and like what nature's doing, the swell direction, which you can't control and can be, it's not that it's always the morning like that. Those conditions might line up in the mid-afternoon. So yeah, that's why there's no set kind of time you can say is better.
So I had this thought, and we talked about it a little bit. The Venn diagram of where the two halves of your life, as it relates to your work life and your surf life, meet, and I had some creative thoughts about, in my mind, what would be in the middle, and I'll let you answer it. But one just pops out right now in response to what you said, which are conditions, right? In which what I hear you describing is that you, first of all, you have to be a student of surfing to really be a surfer. Like, you need to understand the conditions and they're swirling around and changing, and what does it mean, and tides and storms and all sorts of meteorological crap that are really important to whether you're going to have a good day out there or not, or whether you should even go. In deals, we don't control the conditions either. And it struck me as you were saying that there might be some similarity there. And I'd be interested to hear where you think the Venn diagram is.
I guess I would almost contrast it. You're right about conditions. And I guess in our line of work, you're in the position as an advisor, right, where you have to take the conditions as you find them. So I guess to make like a surfing analogy, it'd be more like someone saying, no, you are going to surf tomorrow at 1:00.
Right.
And you look at it and you're like, oh, it's windy, it's cold, it's terrible, right? But I have to go do the best I can with those conditions. And that's more how work is. Whereas you also don't control the conditions in surfing, right? But you can choose to just not engage in it if they're crummy.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's interesting. So for us, we just have to sometimes surf crummy days.
Yeah, lots of them. Yeah. We take them as we find them, for sure.
But that's where I have found, at least I think you'll agree. In fact, I've seen you do this. That's where the creativity comes in, right? When you are handed in a transaction for a client the bag of facts, and you start unpacking it, and there's some things you'll expect to find, this issue or that issue, and like, okay, because every deal has some issues. Sometimes there's like really thorny stuff. That is where the opportunity for people like us to be creative comes in, right? What do you do? You're going to surf that crap situation. And not only that, but you've got to get somebody through to the other side, to a closing or what have you. How are you going to navigate that? Maybe you can talk a little bit about creativity in your work. I'd be interested to hear about that. And then does creativity bear into surfing?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So I guess at work, being in our line of work, being sort of intellectually creative is super value add. That's the way I think about it. There are people that do what we do perfectly competently, but they're not super creative in how they approach it. And I think that when you get into the really thorny areas, as you know, being creative and being that person, you're very much this kind of person too. Like there's this bickering around an issue or people, kind of back and forth about how to resolve it almost in a binary way, right? People start going, I want this. Well, I want this. You have to do this. No, you have to do, X, no Y. And you're often, I've noticed too, that voice that comes from the side goes, well, what if we just did this? Like, can't, Yeah. And it's more than just compromise. It's not just like, in between X and Y is W. It's oftentimes it's like, well, nobody's looked at A, and that kind of intellectual creativity, obviously super important and valuable. In surfing, I'd say, it's not an intellectual pursuit. And you're not like negotiating with anyone other than you're reacting to the conditions, really. And there are definitely surfers who are very creative in how they surf, and you can see it in their surfing, but it's more of an artistic type of creativity. Mm-hmm. And I am not artistic. I don't have that kind of creativity. I can't make music. I love music. I can't make music.
Yeah,
I love art.
Fan.
Yeah. I mean, I love, jam bands, kind of a big thing to me, but I couldn't make that music. So I don't have that kind of creativity. And I would say that my surfing is not creative in that way. Like I see people who are really creative, in what they do, and their personality almost comes through. Mm-hmm. And I'm not creative that way.
Like in how they're shredding a wave, or where they go, or what they
decide
to do.
Yeah, rather than being conventional or doing the same thing every time, they're trying to do something different all the time. That's kind of a creative way of surfing.
Talk to me a little bit about when you're out there surfing. What I would love to hear is how do I climb into your head and get a little bit of a feeling of what it feels like when you catch a great wave. I understand it's probably exhilarating, but process-wise, from the beginning of catching it through the amazing ride, and maybe this happens in your exotic trips, or maybe it happens right here at home. But what does it mean to you? What does it feel like to you these days at this age?
Hey, what's that supposed to mean?
Yeah, right.
No, definitely your abilities decline as you age.
By this age, I meant 32.
Gosh, there's a lot in there. What does it feel like? I mean, if you want to, I'm probably not gonna. It's very difficult to describe. So I'll start with a caveat, of course. That's a very lawyerly thing to do, but I'm probably not going to do a great job at describing. I think it's very difficult to do. I think very few people that I've ever heard do a very good job at describing what it actually feels like. Yeah. But I would say the range of feelings, experiences, there's obviously anticipation, and surfing involves a lot of waiting, probably much like, fishing. It's mostly waiting, and positioning. It's not passive. You're waiting, but you're making sure you're in the right spot. You're reading the conditions. So there's a lot of anticipation and patience involved in that part of it. Mm-hmm. And then when you sort of see the wave that you think is going to be yours and looks like you're in the right spot and you're ready and it's going to be good, there's a focus, I would say, like an extreme level of focus and presence, and being present in the moment throughout sort of the catching the wave and riding the wave. I mean, different waves are different, but if you're in a situation where it's more intense or more, where the waves are really good or big, or, then there's this focus that really carries through. So there is exhilaration for sure, but I would say more than that, the overwhelming feeling would be like an intense focus, a much maybe like more akin to meditating than to playing basketball,
Yeah.
So, and then when you come out of that, I've done, yoga and some meditation and stuff. I'm not like really good at it. I'm not deep into those practices, but I think that feeling when you finish that kind of thing and you feel that like refreshed, like I just really focused. I've just really been in the moment and not thinking about anything else. That's the feeling of like sort of completing that ride or whatever. And you're going to paddle back out, and, you can certainly be excited for the next one, but I think more than that, it's a feeling of sort of having been really present and really having experienced something that's important to you.
I can relate to that from the swimming I do, that it doesn't happen all the time. And I meditate a lot. I have a meditation practice twice a day, but it doesn't happen all the time there either, that sometimes you'll drop into a space where time sort of stops. It's almost like the clock, the hands stop moving. And if I'm swimming, all I'm doing is just focused on my stroke.
Right.
And I hear the swishing of the water, and I can go through that moment. To me, it'll feel like 15 minutes. It could be an hour. It could be an hour and a half. I once went out for a swim off the coast of my house in Michigan, and I ended up swimming like for 2.5 hours to town. And part of that was because I swam halfway, and I was like, oh man, well, I'm already halfway, so I might as well just go the rest of the way and then call for a ride. But that's what I equate it to when I hear you describe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard people refer to like the flow state or a flow state.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably the closest thing to what it is, for me. It's about being present, right? Which is so hard to accomplish in a busy life and a busy legal practice.
Yeah.
And so I think if someone was to say like, is surfing more of like an athletic pursuit or more of a meditative practice? It's much more of a meditative practice than an athletic pursuit, although it obviously blends the two, which is probably why I like it so much.
Yeah. That's so interesting. And so now tell me this, sometimes, going back to my own experience, stuff will creep in, right? You have a call at 2:00. That you've got something really difficult that you're working on at work. Does work ever blast its way through into that space? Or are you pretty good at not having that happen?
I think I'm probably pretty good at it because I sort of do it. I'm out there to be present. Yeah. It's the benefit I get out of it. So I feel like if my nature was to let that stuff creep in too much, I probably wouldn't be as into surfing as I am. It just wouldn't accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish.
Right.
But definitely does sometimes, and it is when things are just generally more stressful. And it's life. It's not just work, but it could be other things. Some with my kids, But it's other things that are important and create stress can sometimes creep in. And in fact, I'll kind of like if. It's not usually the whole time. So like if I'm going out and I'm about to start surfing and I'm usually pretty in the moment, and it'll creep into the session over time, and I'll notice, I just thought about that stressful thing that I was trying to leave.
Your mind starts
and I'm pretty much like the session's over at that point. Like
you'll
I may
just turn tail and say wrong day.
I may as well just head in at that point. Like I'm not getting, again, I'm sort of not getting the benefit that I want from it at that point.
Interesting.
Because it's not like just riding another wave. I mean, I've ridden thousands of waves. Not to say the next one couldn't be my best one ever, but that's not really my primary goal in being there at this point.
Is it hard? That's just a question. Do you ever feel like you don't want to leave because the next wave might be the best?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And when you're younger,
you be out there forever.
Yeah. And sometimes you are. I know people that are in their 40s at least, and maybe even older than that in their 50s and 60s, that you can't believe how long they'll stay out when the waves are good. And when I was younger, that was definitely more of like that fear of missing the next one or not being there for that moment, especially if it's a shared moment, because it's oftentimes with friends, But that's, for me at least, faded out to a large degree. If I can be satisfied, and for me that's more what it's about, is about like I'm satisfied. Like I know there's 10 more waves if I stayed out another hour and a half, but like I'm good. I'm satisfied,
Yeah, I think probably as maturity and being satisfied from other aspects of your life and family, and you have a wonderful crew to go home to and all of that sort of stuff. But what a metaphor for a life that is, I think, because being satisfied, feeling at ease is such an important thing, because boy, that would be hard if everything was just sort of like, well, I can't give up or I can't stop ever because the next thing might be the best thing. That's a tiring way to go through life.
No,
but
totally.
you can do it when you're 17.
Yeah, yeah. And I think
know?
there are those people, those edge case people, right? That you see, there's been a spate, right, of documentaries or
Oh, yeah.
Netflixes about these mountaineers and these rock climbers and stuff. And I look at that, and a lot of them are fairly young as well. But still, you hear it and you can hear it. Like, they cannot stop.
Yeah.
That's not something they can do because, and I kind of like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it, but I'm glad that's not me.
The guy that does the free climbing, I can't remember.
Yeah,
his
there's
name.
a bunch of different ones. Yeah, there's been a little run of them. One, and like a couple of those guys have died, of course.
Right. Well, they take you right to the edge, right? That's where when you're going to live on the edge.
Yeah.
They get to experience this sort of pinnacle of exhilaration, but the edge is the edge.
Yeah, and I think for those people, and there are those people in surfing too, there isn't a satisfaction. Almost could feel not pity. I mean, these people are like killing it. Most of them are very happy with what they're doing. But I'm glad it's not me, because to feel like I wasn't satisfied would really take away like a big piece of what I get out of surfing. Yeah, which is that feeling, like you said, of peace, of like gratitude. Of being at ease. That's how you put it, being at ease. Yeah. And that's a great like way to sum up how I would feel after I have a good session and then I'm going to work. I'm at ease, versus like if I just get up, have my coffee, go to work. Yeah. It's not the same feeling.
Yeah. Are there things you learned or have learned over the years from surfing that you can carry over into your non-surfing life? I know, again, you keep them very separate, but maybe there's things you've learned that you carry one direction or the other.
Yeah, that's definitely a hard question for me because of the way I set my life up, which is they're very separate. And I guess to me, I value the separateness. Yeah. So it actually just makes that question, like I almost can't access that. Like when I try.
It's like totally bifurcated.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I don't.
Why do you think that is?
Oh, we could get really deep on my psychology. There's a lot of reasons. I grew up with two households. I had my mom's and my dad's. They were very different. Oh, so I sort of was very comfortable with two different environments from the very beginning. Yeah. And then I think the other thing is my life sort of surfing and with my friends and my community and stuff is so precious to me. Mm-hmm. And to who I am, it's so like central to who I am for me that and work can often feel much more like an assault on who I am than a part of who I am. So as much as I can enjoy work colleagues, and I do, like work's role in my life is not, I don't integrate it in the same way. And I almost protect, some part of me is probably protecting my personal life, identity with surfing, all of that from my work is how I feel and I experience it. I'm not saying that's a positive thing. I don't like love that about myself necessarily, but that's...
You keep a healthy relationship with work. Because I see you and I see work, Justin, mostly. Sometimes we go to lunch and stuff and we get to pal around, but mostly I see work, Justin, and you're focused and you're clear and you know what you're doing, and you feel it's like you have it together, right? And you don't seem strained. You seem to have a healthy relationship with how you engage with your career. And I also know that when you go away, you're good at creating separation, which for a lot of lawyers is nearly impossible, if not completely impossible. They go away, and it just means, I'll work on a deal from the Eiffel Tower instead of from my office in Century City or wherever.
And I've done that, right? We all do that. So we've had
literally, I've done it from the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah. My biggest one was Ireland. Yeah, that was the last one I remember. But where your family's off enjoying the sights and you're sitting in the hotel room going just like, what am I doing? What am I doing? But we all, it's part of it. And so I accept that stuff. But yeah, I think that it would be probably a better profession for everyone involved if more people could give themselves the space they need to be themselves. Mm-hmm. And I really liked your last guest, Sonny. There was one thing that stuck in my head about that was like being the authentic you. Yeah. Which I think is really counter to at least our generation of lawyers. And maybe there's some, people rag a lot on younger generations, but maybe part of the benefit of younger people is I think they're more into that. I think they're more comfortable asserting that than we were. I think we were like, the suit is on, the tie is properly tied, and this is who I am. I'm a guy in a suit that is here to work. And,
we're like a tag along group on the baby boomers.
Yeah.
We're like even though we're not baby boomers, I think that mentality kind of creeped into when we were growing up in the
very
early
much
70s. And so I agree. Like, I totally conform.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is an example of me being more authentic of who I am.
I think it's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And it only took, a little while to figure that out, 24-year law career, that I can blend different things. But I think that a lot of people don't know how to access that. And that's actually one of my goals for this podcast, is to inspire and say to people like, hey, you know what? You can pick up that thing you put down 20 years ago, and it can actually be really cool for your life.
Yeah, and I guess for me, and because a lot of lawyer wellness kind of things that I've heard, they always take the angle of like, this will make you a better lawyer. And it always makes me want to like beat my head against the wall. Like the whole point is you're not just a lawyer. Like you're a person, you're a human being, and you have whatever passions you have other people in your life besides the people that are across the table from you in a deal. So I always think of it like, no, it's a good in and of itself. It's not about being a better lawyer. It's about being a more fulfilled human being, and sure that has knock-on effects for your job or whatever. But like, I think, and maybe it is still like, there's a word, I think both like Gen X is how we would describe it. Right. Yeah. And we still have that like work is sort of the highest order thing. And I guess I've never felt that way. Yeah. That's never made sense to me. And it actually kind of grates on me, when people present things as like, well, this is all about making your work life better, even if there's lip service to like work life. I think it's really like, you got to go the other way. I think people need to, I don't tell other people what to do. I tried to reorder my priorities so that it was really the things that were actually important to me that were the actual priorities, and then make them that way. And that's very hard in our profession. People don't like it. And it's a constant setting boundaries, I think.
Well, because you're swimming upstream when you do it. Yeah. And when you're in, say, big firm life, right, which we've both done for meaningful amounts of time, there's a current that runs a certain direction. And for the most part, at least I haven't been in big firm life for 14 years now, so things might be very different. So I don't want to overgeneralize.
Probably worse.
But who knows? I'm sure we'll get feedback one way or the other. But at that time, you had to play by the rules, right? And you had to make your hours, and you had to, there's lots of had-tos. And so ultimately, I went out and formed my own firm in 2010, and you did it in 2011. And maybe that's sort of us saying, well, we're gonna do this our way. Well, you've obviously beat the system, right? Because you have a law firm that is known as really the preeminent tax law boutique, certainly in California, if not beyond. And you're working with pretty much every transactional law firm that doesn't have a tax department of its own, and even some that do. And yet, you have this relationship with work where you have created really good boundaries. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that would listen to this and go, how the hell do I figure that out? How do I do that? That's what I want.
Yeah. No, we're definitely, I think we're very fortunate to be in the position we're in. I think being in a niche helps. But I think really bigger than that is, it's just back to, I think, those priorities and sort of sticking with them, right? Like everybody's different. Everybody's priorities are different. But I think what creeps in is compromise for people. Mm-hmm. So if you have core things that are important to you, I would say you just don't compromise. And so like an example would be, if you have a value in your business, in your law firm, that was really important, and that's kind of one of the reasons you did it the way you did it, right? Then that takes priority over any client or any, and that's hard sometimes, a lot of times, very hard.
It costs you business periodically.
Absolutely. And a lot of times it's for the best, If you're willing to pay the cost, right, of making sacrifices to preserve that value, you can preserve that value. It's all about what you're willing to pay for it. And so I know in our firm, we're always like, when we're making decisions about things, we're always going back to like, why are we doing this? Why do we do this in the first place? And if this other thing doesn't fit that, then that other thing just has to go, and I think sticking with that over time has been what's enabled us to have what we have, which is like practice at the highest level, but do it in a way that makes sense for us, for our lives.
Yeah.
Because there's so many compromises along the way that could be made or could have been made that would have just sort of gotten rid of that. Like you said, the tide is in one way, the current's running one way. So if you want to carve out a space for yourself that's different than that, you have to constantly police that.
Yeah.
And be aware of it.
And it's not easy to do. And certainly at this stage, speaking for myself, at this stage of my career, it's easier to do than, say, when I was 35. 35, I was still in big law. When I was 40, I was 3 years into having my own firm. And, you had to get work to eat.
Yep.
And I already had a family, you had a family. So sometimes I look back and I say, wow, if I could have given my younger self advice, would my younger self have been able to execute on it anyway? Sometimes I think these things are temporal. You really, you have to be in the right place in your life to be able to make those moves. And fortunately for us, we've, figured out how to get to this point where we can work with clients that we really like and be in alignment with our values. I think, because you mentioned the cost, there's a cost to operating in alignment with your values, right?
Yep.
I won't do certain things, or things are not comfortable. There's also a cost to not being in alignment with your values.
Yeah.
And that cost is, for me, has always been too much to bear, because you take it home, it takes you to places where you don't want to be when you're operating out of alignment with your values. So I admire you. I always have, with your stick-to-itness with how you want things, how you visualize things, and you operate in conformity with them. It's pretty cool.
Well, I appreciate that, and I mean, I've seen you have a journey yourself, and I think I've seen you get closer and closer to what pursuing what's authentically you, which is awesome to watch. And I also think surfing, to bring it back to surfing, it really does play a big role in this. Like, you're sort of like complimenting me, but in a lot of ways, and I appreciate it, but in a lot of ways, I didn't have a lot of choice in some of it, with respect to surfing, at least. It's never really felt like a choice for me. Yeah. And I think probably other surfers would relate to it. If it's who you are, it has a pull on you that's like pretty much irresistible. Mm-hmm. So I've always needed to be able to react when the conditions are good, or when I know, I'm going to have the opportunity to surf. And so that sort of like forces you to, in a way, to build your life around that in a way that works for that. Yeah. If you absolutely cannot leave Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., you're going to be in an office in Century City those hours no matter what. Well, you're not going to be a surfer. Like, right. I mean, if you are, you're going to feel a constant pull and like misery when you know that it's good and you're not there. So in a way, it's like a tool that helped me do that.
It was the, what? Irresistible force.
Yeah. Yeah, in a lot of ways it is.
Pulling you out.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that, I know we talked about your favorite book, and some quotes in there that it seems like you're sort of, those were in line. Maybe you want to talk about that book a little bit, because I haven't read it yet, and I'm really interested in doing so.
Yeah, so that book is called Barbarian Days by William Finnegan, who's a really accomplished journalist. I think he doesn't call himself a journalist, but long form writer. Writes a lot. It was written a lot about conflict around the world, about travel, about all kinds of things. But I'd say it's really hard to write about surfing. Really hard. There's a lot of books that involve surfing. There's a lot of movies. You've seen some of them.
Oh, yeah.
You mentioned Point Break.
Point Break. That's the one.
And I think that's a good example.
Bodie.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with any kind of like media about surfing that's fictional like that, or even like you read nonfiction about it, it's so hard to capture what it really is for someone who I would describe as like a real surfer.
Yeah.
Most of the accounts are just hollow, or they're too flowery, or they just don't hit it. You read it and you're like, I've read a lot of books like that are based around surfing. And I think that's by far the best book that really captures it.
Yeah.
And it's written for a general audience. So people could just read it and enjoy it. But I think for a surfer, there's something that just hit me when I read that book. I was like, this guy actually really nailed it. And I think it's because of who he is, frankly. Like, he's a real surfer. If you read that book, it's an awesome adventure tale if you just want to read something. But if you really want to get an insight into what it feels like to be a surfer and have it sort of part of your identity, that's the only book I've ever read that really gets that right.
You mentioned the book, and I went and looked up some quotes and things. I know there's some quotes that mean a lot to you, and they seem to be very consistent with what you've said. One of your quotes, the quotes that you liked in the book, I did not consider even passingly that I had a choice when it came to surfing. My enchantment would take me where it would.
Right.
And that's sort of it, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's really part of your identity. So there's not really a way to separate it.
Has it changed over the years, surfing for you? I mean, we talked about that a little bit. You're not 17-year-old Justin. You're now 32-year-old Justin.
Yeah, for the 18th year in a row.
Right. Does it? Are you looking for the same? Are you going out there for the same reasons today that you went out for then, and are you getting the same things out of it, or how has it changed for you?
So largely, yes, I'd say. The way that it's changed is what we've kind of touched on it already, is I think it's easier to be satisfied. Like, there's a satisfaction that's easier to attain, or that feeling of being at ease. Mm-hmm. Sort of easier to attain in a way. You need less great waves or great moments, or, and a lot of it, I guess that's one way it's changed. The other way it's changed is when you're younger, I feel like your friends, the people you spend time with are really accessible. Like, you just have more time. There's more socializing, right? So you see people that you like to see a lot. And as you get older and everybody's lives get more complicated, I think the camaraderie aspect, or seeing people that you enjoy spending time with and doing, surfing with people that you've, in my case, been surfing with for 30 or 40 years, is that part's more and more special, or like more part of it.
When you get to be together out there.
Yeah.
That shared history.
Yeah, that makes it special. And then I guess the lack of opportunity to spend as much time together as when you were teenagers or whatever makes it kind of extra special.
You ever heard the Pearl Jam song Santa Cruz?
I'm sure I have, but I might not know the name. You want to sing it?
No. Everyone would instantly shut this off. It's a great Pearl Jam song. There's so many great ones, but it's one of the lesser known ones. And it's obviously about Santa Cruz, and it's dealing with surfing, but it talks about essentially being our age, right? Guys in their 40s, 50s, but having a friend who you've known since you were 17, and has a line something like, "And when I see him, we're 17."
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yeah.
You're transported. And I've got dear friends in Michigan who I've been dear friends with since I was 17. And when I'm with them, we're joking around, and we're 17.
Yeah.
And that you get to go, that's a pretty awesome thing you get to do with those folks.
Yeah. No, it's really special, and that's definitely a bigger and bigger part of it.
Yeah. We've covered a lot. I guess what I would say is there something we haven't talked about that maybe you want to shed a little light on, or you think is important to touch on before we wrap up?
There's a lot. I could talk about surfing all day. I think the most important thing, though, in like, to bring it back to the Venn diagram of really what you're doing here and what this is about, which I think is so important, is talking to professionals, lawyers mostly, I think, but people who are driven in their careers and want to have a good, fulfilling career, but maybe just know that something's kind of out of balance in their life. I think a lot of lawyers certainly feel that way. I'm sure a lot of other professionals and people feel that way generally. But I would say it's so important to recognize that, to not push that down. And I agree with you that situations are different and time is different for people. But as a long-term project, to look into your life and say, like, what is it that makes me? And don't let that get totally subordinated to the point where it's just, you're not you anymore. Because I think that's how a lot of people start to feel, like, I'm just this, I'm a lawyer. Like, I guess I would sum this whole thing up for me, like, in a little story or whatever, as, like, I remember thinking, I don't know, 8-10 years ago, and I don't remember what prompted it, but, like, if someone told me to list, like, what I am, like, who are you? Like, what are you? And, like, where does lawyer fit on that list? It's, like, pretty far down, and I mean, husband and father is at the top. But surfer is way before lawyer, husband, father, friend, surfer, lawyer, it's just, and that's not bad. That's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean I don't like being a lawyer, or being a lawyer is not a worthy thing to do, or anything, or that's not important to support.
Well, you're not really
family.
good at it.
Yeah. It's just, it's not. And I guess I would hope other people, could do this, something like that. Like, look at your life and be like, it's okay to say being a lawyer is super important. It supports my family. I actually really enjoy the law. Like, it is my right calling. I found it. I'm glad I found it. But still be like, yeah, but I also, like, I love playing the piano. Or or I love doing yoga, and I should make sure that I, prioritize who I am as a person. I think that's kind of the main thing for me.
Well, I think that's a great message to end on. And Justin Bowen, my dear friend, I'm really grateful you came on today. And
thanks for the opportunity.
I think this is going to be some good stuff for our people to hear.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. Good to hang out with you.
Yeah. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks for joining us today on The Practice of You, hosted by me, Jeff Sklar. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, sklarkirsh.com. I really appreciate your positive reviews, comments, and sharing this show with others. Until next time, enjoy the present moment and don't forget to practice you. This podcast is considered attorney advertising by the California State Bar. The discussions in this podcast do not constitute professional advice of any kind, including without limitation, medical, legal, or business. And you are advised to consult with your own physicians, lawyers, and other advisors before undertaking any activities discussed in this podcast.